Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to welcome back Nancy Bleeke, the founder of Sales Pro Insider and developer of the Genuine Sales Process. We had Nancy on the show back in episode 41, and she's been my sales trainer and coach since I started my RIA back in 2012. I wanted to bring Nancy back on the show because, well, for two reasons. She has an exciting announcement to make about her sales course and how it's going to be more readily available to listeners. But also, I wanted to explore some of the things that get in the way of our ability to be successful at sales. She breaks down the ability to succeed into two categories, skill and will. Now, most coaches focus on skill, but in this episode, we break down the 4 success drivers that she's identified that will help you overcome the will side of the equation, which is equally as powerful as the skill set that you have. Nancy is a goldmine of information, so you're going to want to listen to this one all the way to the end. She's also put together a page of information for listeners at www.salesproinsider.com/XYPN. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplannynetwork.com/89. In addition to the typical resources, you'll find a link to our recently launched book, co-authored by Kitsis and myself, titled The Monthly Retainer Model: What it is, why it works, and how to implement it in your firm. If you'd like more time to spend with your clients, First Ascent Asset Management can help. First Ascent builds and manages investment portfolios for independent financial advisors and their clients for a flat fee of $500 per account. This industry-first approach to pricing makes professional investment management affordable for everyone without sacrificing quality. First Ascent's 7-member investment committee includes 5 CFAs, a PhD, and a CFP who collectively bring decades of experience, objectivity, and fresh perspectives. First Ascent offers a variety of portfolios designed to produce solid long-term performance while keeping internal expenses and trading costs low. First Ascent's high-touch service team stands with you as a resource to provide guidance and to make account opening and servicing the accounts easy and hassle-free. They also offer a streamlined technology platform to facilitate proposal generation and paperless account opening. Visit their website at firstascentam.com or give them a call at 720-465-7888. Also be sure to go to xyplannynetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. You can interact with other listeners, ask us questions, and more. Without further ado, here is my interview with Nancy. Hey, Nancy, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for taking the time to be on today.
I'm always thrilled to have a conversation with you, Alan.
So for anyone that has not gone back in the archives, about a year ago in episode 41, we had Nancy on to talk about Genuine Sales, her sales process that she has developed over several decades of coaching financial advisors and other sales professionals, I guess. So if you want, you can go check that out at xyplannynetwork.com/41, which will give you a good overview of sort of what we're talking about today. We'll try to avoid rehashing too much of that. But obviously, in the last year, you have been very busy. So you were one of the speakers at our conference this year, and I know you were working on sort of taking your course virtual. So tell me about the process of sort of going from in person, which is how I've went through your course twice now, in a room with you to sort of transition to being able to deliver the education virtually.
Well, switching it over to virtual was an interesting test of creativity and identifying not only the technology, but also the format that we could continue to make it interactive and continue to provide an experience for the participants to not just interact with me or a facilitator, but to interact with each other and build those relationships, which continue on after the formal course ends. And so we launched it. We've had our first group through it, and the results were stronger than I could have possibly imagined. And so we believe now we can save people from having to travel to Wisconsin for 2 days and instead be able to sit in their own office or their own home and get a world-class live facilitated experience.
That's awesome. And again, like I was actually in Milwaukee, I guess the first time I went through, and then I flew to Milwaukee the second time to go through. And part of the course, and I think the strength of the course, is not only in the interaction with the facilitator and learning, but also sort of splitting off into small groups to discuss things, because you generally have, I think, around 12 students that go through sort of each course together. And so you could split off into these, 4 groups of 3 or 3 groups of 4 and sort of talk through things. So how have you been able to get that sort of cross-learning, cross-pollination side of it, that in person is just easy to do, but virtually it's a little bit of a challenge?
Well, with technology, so we use the Adobe Connect platform, and the reason we selected that is because we can break people into the breakout groups. So we can divide them up into pairs, triads, any combination, and give them a whiteboard to work on, and it records it. And when they come back into the large group, they can tell us what's on their whiteboard. So we're all on webcam, so we're seeing each other, and we really were able to duplicate almost everything except the handshake and the hugs that we do in the classroom.
Which, sad to miss, but it's amazing. I mean, the cost savings of, the travel in the hotel and being away from family for a couple of days, as well as just, being out of the office. It's a huge advantage to be able to do virtual. And it's the direction the world is going. Financial planning has been slow to adapt. I wonder, I might actually like to go through the sales coaching series on virtual, because I think there's probably a lot to learn about the delivery mechanism. And I wonder what the takeaways would be for advisors thinking about, as we continue to turn our financial planning processes into more of a virtual basis because a lot of folks want to get into more group coaching, doing more group-based models. And are there opportunities that someone could leverage, basically copying your model of delivery, but doing it for financial planning, not training advisors. So anyway, that's a side note.
That's interesting. Maybe we'll have to do a podcast on that and all the things that we've learned. And I used a good instructional designer who had experience so that it wasn't, starting totally from scratch. But there's a lot out there on how to virtually use technology to communicate and to be able to brainstorm and share illustrations and still kind of be sitting side by side with them versus just audio.
Yeah, it's a good point that you get a master's degree in instructional design. It is not something that you just sort of pick up on the side. There's a lot of training that goes into that. But so you've taken your first group through sort of in a virtual method, or it's sort of in this virtual course. And my understanding is a lot of those folks actually came from having listened to your first episode on the podcast and were XYPN members. So did you see, was it pretty much just the same in terms of results, or did you see different results, not necessarily better or worse, in terms of just the way folks went through the course and the successes they're having now?
I think it's the same or better. I think because it was virtual and there's assignments in between. To get better at anything, we have to work. And so, coming to a webinar where somebody is just listening to a speaker and taking notes, it doesn't get us better. It's doing. And so instead of the first 2 days being on site in Wisconsin and then being 4 3.5-hour sessions virtually, there was assignments in between for watching videos and doing some things. And so I think from the beginning, some of them told me that from the moment they got their box of opportunity in the mail with all the things that they needed for the virtual experience, it started setting the stage for this is going to be work. You're going to take this information and fit it to your firm and adjust and look at how you do each part of your sales conversation, and is your proposal in alignment with selling collaboratively? So I think that earlier on, they were adopting and adapting the information. Then when it's done live and it's 2 days and you're out of your office, maybe 4 full days with travel. So you've got all this catch up when you get back. I don't think we had that. So I feel like there was earlier adoption.
Oh, very interesting. And I love box of opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm hearing so many things. I'm like, as a financial planner, you could send your client a box of opportunity when they're onboarding. I used to do welcome kits, sort of in an envelope, just, before the introductory meeting, sort of before that first meeting, it had a bio and description of services and pricing and things like that. Cause I didn't want anybody to be like, oh, you're where'd you go to college? Like, I just wanted them to know. And they loved that. They loved getting that welcome kit in the mail. So this takes it one step further, and probably, for a new client that's onboarding, sort of give them that new client experience, which I'll admit is lacking for most financial planners. We look at it as like, all right, give us all your information, as opposed to an opportunity to wow.
Well, and it's not only wow, but, make them feel important. And people don't get to feel important. It's, a welcome something. They get that from their doctor when they make an appointment and have to fill out paperwork ahead. So what can you do to let them see a little bit of your personality? And so that won't work for everybody, but maybe some other kind of term will. But we had some big stickers made on Vistaprint, and, it says your box of opportunity has arrived. And we put some fun things in there so that when they opened it up, they knew that this was going to be something different coming. We wanted the experience. So the other thing that we did, which is kind of interesting if you think about applying it to financial services and that personal relationship that you have with your clients, is we started collecting pictures up front. So we wanted them to send in pictures of them in a variety of hobbies or family or things that are important to them, so that before the session started each time, there was a slideshow playing with people with their pictures and their names and a fun fact about them. And the funniest one was this woman who said, "I'm the worst procrastinator, so much so that my third child was born on my kitchen floor." Well, that got everybody wanting to talk to her.
Just, again, facilitating those conversations that are on a virtual basis, which I don't necessarily think they're harder to build relationships virtually, but it is different than you do when you're in person.
Yes, that's what we really had to think about, is how can we get them to build relationships with each other and understand each other besides just their business? Because as you know, in any business relationship, they're always better once you get to that point where it's not just all business. And so, when they were talking each in the first couple of sessions, we gave them a question that they had to respond to with each other, such as, what is it that you most enjoy doing right after work? Or, what's a goal that you reached in the past that's your highlight so far? Different things to get their conversations going, separate from let's talk about sales conversations.
So, and, for folks that are interested, again, go back and listen to episode 41, because we detailed a lot of the sales coaching process and your belief system around collaborative selling instead of, I'm just going to shove it down your throat and get you to sign the contract before you walk out of the office, because that is obviously not the way things are done anymore. And it's sad that it's how things were ever done, but it's where we came from, I guess.
Oh, it's still being done that way. I met someone last weekend that was all about 20-minute conversations, and let's cut to the chase. From what you've already told me, I know what we have to do. So do you trust me? Let's get going. And I was like, honest to goodness, I think my eyes were bugging out of my head as I'm listening to. He has up to 20 appointments a day.
Oh,
yeah.
Good
and he
gracious.
first told me that he was a fee only planner. And I really questioned him on it, and it turned out no. He's a product. He's a product salesperson. But he first told me, "Oh yeah, I'm a fee only planner." No. Fee only planners can't do 20 appointments in a day.
How many sales coaches out there could actually grill someone into getting to the core that they are not actually fee only? They're just claiming to be fee only. What a mess. So, again, we talked through sort of the process, but one of the pieces that you and I have talked about in the past, and it sounds like in this last iteration of doing the virtual course, it continues to come up, and I'm sure it comes up in every single group that you take through, is what you call the success drivers. So can you just give us sort of an overview of what are the success drivers and sort of how do they play into the sales process?
Well, I'm going to take it back even a step further than sales and say it affects everything we do. So no matter what we are wanting to accomplish, whether it's a sport, a hobby, being the best financial advisor in bringing that expertise, or in our selling efforts, it takes skill. So we have to know how to get things done. And then it takes will. And that's the internal drivers. That's why we call it the success drivers. The internal drivers that really make the difference between the successful people and the not so successful people. And I've seen it for my entire career and even before that. And so I call it the success drivers because, some people will just wrap it into, well, is somebody motivated? Well, it's much more than that. It's not just about a motivation. There's a lot of internal factors that impact that drive to do the things that we need to do to be successful.
I love the way you break that down because, we do talk a lot about the skill, right? So how do you have the conversation? How do you structure the process? And all of those things that are so important that when we think about sales, we don't think about it in a sense that sales is a process. But, that's probably the number one thing I have learned from you is just that it is a process. You have to have a process going in, and that's okay. It's not just an off-the-cuff conversation. It doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. But that's the skill side. And again, this will side, I think we can take for granted because, one, we see a lot of quote-unquote successful people, and we just assume it's innate. It's just they were born a great conversationalist, or they were born a great public speaker, or whatever. And some people are just gifted in different ways. We all have our gifts, and that obviously contributes, but it doesn't mean it's not something we can address and something that we can sort of look at. So where do you see, I guess when most folks come into your classroom, do you see a lack of skill, or do you see a lack of will, or do you really see both, that we have to sort of be focused on both of these pieces if we're going to be successful at this process?
It's both, because we need to learn what and how to do things. But the driver underneath that, and making the time, having the confidence, if we'll give them different words in a minute, but having the confidence, having the beliefs, being focused on the objectives and what's most important to you, having the wherewithal of being able to be resilient enough to bounce back from challenges, not only in the sales conversation, but once you work with clients. I bet there's a million examples of a client at some point not being happy with something and, maybe chewing you out about something, or, raising big objections to something or a big concern, and being able to work through that with them and not let it stop you from doing the rest of the things you need to do that day with other people or to build your business. And so that it really does drive all your actions, not just your sales actions.
So for another interesting take on this, back in episode 40, so one episode before we had you on, we had Carl Richards on, and he talked about the imposter syndrome. And I think it's just a fascinating topic that we don't have to dig in today, but for folks that are interested in learning more about sort of getting out of your own way and being able to sort of, I guess, deal with some of the insecurity or lack of confidence that can come from what psychologists have called imposter syndrome. You can go back. It's XYPlanningnetwork.com/40 if you want to dig in there. So let's just sort of go through, because you've identified 6 success drivers. And so let's just go through them one by one. And I think we all deal with each of these pieces at different times in our career. But I will say that, my partner Kitsis jokes about that when he started selling, or he first started his career in life insurance sales, and he jokes he's a failed life insurance salesman at this point, but that, their model for getting over the will was go buy a very, very expensive house and an expensive car and have really big car payments and a mortgage payment, because that's going to give you the motivation you need to go sell, because you got to make your payments.
I have heard that too. Yes. Yep.
It cracks me up because I didn't come from this world of insurance sales, but I guess that's probably very motivating for some folks, and competition may be motivating for others in terms of sales competitions and that sort of thing. So it's interesting how, it's sort of this evolving concept that ultimately, I like your version better. It's just a little friendlier. So we'll start at the top.
Well, it's a little bit, but it ties into, it's a little more genuine, right, and collaborative than manipulative. And so many old school sales leaders believe that they need to motivate and manipulate people to get things done. And we've seen that when leaders. So if anybody's listening and you have people on your team that you're trying to help be more productive, achieve more, it's not about manipulation, because true motivation comes from within. Whatever you do is short term. And that's why that approach to buying something big and expensive is to try to get it to be, that 5-year term or that 20-year mortgage or something to try to keep it going. But we believe the success drivers are much better. So, let's start. So the first one ties into a lot of what you've already said. And I really call this that there's 4 success drivers, because 3 of them all wrap into one. And that's the first one. It's about beliefs. And I think you've already touched on that a little bit with the imposter syndrome. And when we we call it integrated beliefs, because there's 3 beliefs that integrate and impact our actions, our activity levels, and our confidence. That's the belief in yourself. Do you believe in your personal abilities and competence to be successful in what you're doing? And, with so many of the XYPN members, especially being new to starting their own business, or, for the first time being in a capacity where they've got to win the business, belief in self is a huge aspect of, you got to believe strongly enough in yourself to start. So that's good. Then you got to believe enough in your abilities to do all the parts of the job to build your firm.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And something that's overlooked is that when you're in a meeting and you don't have that confidence, you screamed, right? Like we've all been across the table from someone that was just not feeling comfortable in what they were selling us, couldn't answer the questions, sort of tripped over themselves, was just sort of passive, I guess, in their ability to say, this is what I do and this is why I do it and this is why it's, right for you. And it's amazing that you can say the same thing, just coming at it from a position of power instead of a position of weakness and fear, just coming at the same thing from a position of power, saying the exact same words. It's amazing what that will do for the confidence level of your client or your prospective client that's sitting across the table from you, because they're about to turn over their life savings to you and their life's goals. Right. They're about to turn over their ability to meet their goals that they have in life to you to help you manage that. They want to know that you're confident that you can do it. And I will tell you that if you have the CFP and you've been doing this for 3, 5, 10 years, and you've worked with dozens or hundreds of clients, you have the skill set. Sometimes it just doesn't feel like it, which is a challenge. So how do you overcome lack of confidence? Is it just practice, or are there, ways that you have found that will actually help folks sort of address these head on instead of just, I guess, waiting until they eventually go away?
Waiting until they go away. Well, first of all, one thing that you were saying, is so true. Our lack of belief in ourselves comes out in many ways. It's not just the words we're saying. It's our tone. It's our body posture. It's the way we shake their hand. It's the confidence in us asking them to make a decision or commit to something. It comes out in everything. And when there's a disconnect there, what it leads to is a lack of people trusting you. Something's off. They're not sure what it is. And I can guarantee that most prospects aren't thinking it's your confidence. They're thinking that there's something they need to be wary of.
That's a good point.
And it's kind of like that flashing danger, danger, danger. And it's not going to help them want to move forward.
So that's really addressing this sort of belief in self. And so is this just...
So to build it, how do you build it? First of all, this is all internal work. You can develop all of these. Everyone isn't born confident. We can build it. So a few things to build belief in yourself. First of all, take inventory of what you've done in the past that was successful. So depending on what you're struggling with in your belief in self, look for evidence of where you were strong there. Even if it's one example. Oh, I did do this in the past. I have worked with these different types of clients. Even if I was a relationship manager for somebody else, when I was working with clients, I was able to identify additional ways that we could help them. And I did deliver the services that they needed. And I did get referrals from them. And I did build a strong trust bond, whatever that is, but take inventory and write it down. Don't just think it, write it down. In fact, you might remember, Alan, we give out smile files
Yep.
in our training because, have a repository to keep things that remind you of when you've been successful, those thank yous, though, from people. So often now we get them in an email and they just sit there. And still, many people need it more tangible than that. Print it out, hold that piece of paper, read those words, and keep them somewhere. So that's one thing, is taking inventory of when you have been successful in like situations to build that. If you have to, a lot of people have their designations on their walls or somewhere visible to them. But whatever you can do to remind yourself, another great way, and this is for all the beliefs, we're going to talk about two more, talk to people that have received value from you in the past. Interview them and not to be self-serving, but, let them know, listen, I want to work with more people at the best level I can. Help me understand what's been most valuable to you in our advice, in our services, and get it straight from other people. Get them recorded, have them transcribed. You can get transcription done for $1 a minute, with the people in the Philippines. Get it. But whatever you can do to get that tangible things that you might need. And then, of course, there's the old Stuart Smalley. Was that the guy from Saturday Night Live? Where you stand in the mirror and you say, I'm good enough. I forget what he used to say. I'm strong enough. I'm good enough, whatever. And doggone it, people like me, and there's, people talk about the power pose and having a good posture and making sure that your surroundings are the level of professionalism that you want to portray. Those are just a few examples of building your confidence.
I love it. And see, at XYPN, we run, since we have a virtual team, everything that we do is in Slack, which is just sort of this centralized communication system. And we actually have an entire channel dedicated. The title of it is XYPN is the shit. And every time we get a compliment from a member or a vendor or anything, we dump it in there. And what we have learned is that, because there will be days where you just feel beat up, that you can walk into the morning and you feel confident.
Right.
And then that, that client that you just knew, or that prospect that you just knew was going to come on as a client, says, you know what, I've decided to go a different direction, or a client leaves you, or, you get a mean comment on Twitter about your blog post, like whatever. Like, it's amazing how fast even the most confident of people can get stripped of that feeling. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Just being able to go back in and go, you know what? I do help people. Even if that one person didn't really see it, and maybe I didn't communicate it the best to that prospective client or whatever it is. But it's not meant to blind you to the fact that we can all improve and there's always things that we can work on. But sometimes you just need to pick me up. And it works as well as a stiff drink in the evening sometimes. So,
well, affirmations, putting affirmations on where you get ready in the morning, on the steering wheel of your car. Some people feel it's so cheesy, but there's a reason that people do it. If you look at top athletes, they all have ways of continually affirming and validating who they are, what they do, etc.
Absolutely. So that's belief in self. So what is the difference between that and then sort of the next one, belief in role?
Well, the next is belief in role. So belief in role is about believing that you're giving value to others as a financial advisor. So believing in that role of being a financial advisor, and that there is value in that to the people that will be paying you for your services. So you have to believe that that role really does. And I believe that most XYPN members have strong belief in the value of a fee-only planner. So that's typically not one that's hurting badly,
sure,
but probably still could use some, constant affirmation and belief that it's still valid. And like you were saying, when you're having that one negative that someone thinks that a piece of information you've shared is just, bad or stupid, that it stacks up against 500 people that thought it was brilliant.
Sure. And the one negative comment always sticks out.
Oh,
I mean, it's amazing.
yes.
You could have 500 positive comments and that one negative, you're like, you know what? That's just mean. It's just hard to get past it.
And who knows where that person was coming from that day. What's one thing that's interesting when we're working with people, and we work with thousands of people every year. So multiply that over 20 years, it's a lot of people we've worked with. That when we do some activities around identifying a success of something going right, and almost always people want to go to when it didn't work, or when they had something bad happen, or when they didn't do something. And it's a constant trying to reframe them of, yes, that's true. And when is a time when you did follow through on this, or you did do that, and so our society seems to think that spending too much time reflecting or noting your successes makes you arrogant. And we're not looking for arrogance. We're looking for confidence. You don't have to take it all the way to being arrogant. And stop focusing so much on when we didn't do something, when we failed, when, we just didn't believe or carry through on something, and to balance that at least with, one of those to one time when you did something right. But it would be better, actually, there's a 5-to-1 ratio. You should, in your relationships and for yourself, 5 positives to 1 negative. That's a healthy amount. That's how much positive we need to combat that negative that we have about ourselves and others.
Yeah. And you see this all the time. And anytime we're working with clients, that they focus on the dollar they lost, many times not the $5 they gained. That, we're wired. Our brains are wired that we focus more on the pain than pleasure. And it's just, in many ways, our brains are wired it works against us in many ways. And sometimes you just have to stay really focused and try to find ways to trick yourself. Because that's really what many of these things are, is tricking our brain into doing what we know it needs to do. And sometimes it just doesn't want to cooperate sometimes.
Yeah, it's programming your brain.
Yeah, that's a good point. So then belief in value is the third one. So could define that one, then sort of the difference between belief in role and belief in value, because I always get these two mixed up.
So belief in value is believing in the value of what you're providing and like that it's worth money. So belief in value is believing that if I'm charging $5,000 for an initial plan, that it's worth it, that person is better off paying me $5,000 than doing nothing or working with somebody else. So it doesn't mean that they couldn't get that service somewhere else for that price, but that what they're paying for the service that they're getting is worth it. And the difference between that and belief in role is that the belief in the role is more about the belief that you're personally bringing to someone else.
Gotcha.
Which is different from belief in self, in that I'm believing in my abilities and competence, not about the value I'm giving someone else. So belief in self is my believing in my abilities and competence. Belief in the role is that the role as a financial advisor and me as part of that is worthwhile and, helping others. And belief in value is that I deserve to be paid for it.
And there's obviously a ton of crossover, which is why you said these all sort of fall under integrated beliefs, because they're obviously interconnected. I will say belief in value is one that, quite frankly, frustrates me when I have conversations with financial advisors, because we're seeing a lot of things these days. And actually, at the time of this recording, we just had a new announcement about a robo-advisor platform Betterment that's going to be rolling out a call center. So you can call in and get a question answered from a financial advisor. And it's like, we're already seeing an uproar around, oh my gosh, this competes with us in what we do as financial planners. And I always have to say, define what you do as a financial planner. What are all the pieces that you do throughout your comprehensive financial planning process and the ongoing relationship with an advisor? And then tell me what a piece of technology is doing, and try to explain to me why you think you're in competition with this, automated solution. Now, is there some crossover? Of course. But to even begin to compare those it's just not even reasonable. And I think that it's hard to communicate all of these, I guess, the value of financial planning, because it's such an intangible. It's so, my definition of financial planning is we help clients live great lives. They get to live their great life. How in the heck are you supposed to define great life on a piece of paper with numbers. You just can't, it's
in an algorithm, right?
It just doesn't work. But, at the end of the client relationship in 15, 20, 30 years, you want them to be able to say, I am thrilled to have paid the fees because you have helped me accomplish what I wanted to out of life. And I guarantee you, as a fee-only advisor doing ongoing comprehensive financial planning, your clients will be thankful that you were in their life. But there's still this barrier that we want to discount the value of planning, like, oh yeah, this technology is going to do it, so I guess I should just have to change careers. I got to lower my fees. And it's like, no, that all it's doing is validating that we are so valuable because it's showing how much they charge for just this little sliver of what we do. So
good point. Yeah, we've been paying our fee-only planner for 24 years at this point.
And happily continuing.
Because you know what? This week, as you know, we're dealing with the end of my father-in-law's life. We were able to reach out to our financial planner now and say, here's what we're going through. We're going to, need to be talking with you. I couldn't get that out of a piece of software. Just them responding back, with some words of comfort. Can't get that out of software.
Yeah. And financial planning came from this place where whenever we sold everything on commission, we sold on fear, right? I mean, back in the day, my great-grandfather bought a whole life policy because someone showed up on his doorstep and was basically like, what's going to happen to your farm if you died? So it was always this fear-based selling. And then we got into this like complexity-based selling, that if I can confuse you infinitely, you'll buy from me because I'm the only one who can solve your problems.
I'm the expert and you're nothing without me. Yes.
And you can't get the information. And we've moved into this era with Google where we don't know anything that's not on Google. We're not the bearers of knowledge or anything like that, or of information, but we do hold the wisdom and the experience to help people navigate making good financial decisions, because, we manage behavior. We don't manage money. We manage behavior around the money. And so it's so interesting, and it's so hard to articulate that, but you have to start with, you've got to believe that the value is there, because if you don't believe the value is there, then you will never convince a prospective client to work with you, because they're not going to see the value either, because you don't even believe in it. And I don't know how to accomplish that short of, I guess my recommendation is, if you don't know the value of a financial planner, go hire one.
Yeah.
We're in this business, but we're all numbers. We all learn the CFP material. Go hire a financial planner and see it from the client side of the table to understand how valuable financial planning is for yourself and your family. And then come back and tell me that, I think you'll see that's how you learn, the value of what we do. But I don't know, maybe there are other ways, other ideas you have that are less extreme than just go hire your own planner.
Well, I think you can talk to people like me who have had a planner, and what have they, received from that all the years, and build the cases and the examples and the stories of what people have gotten out of it, whether it was from your direct services or another planner.
Sure.
Which will help, build that for yourself. When you get compared maybe to something else that's maybe much less expensive, don't be focused on, for $500, they can get this plan, through some other kind of service versus what you're charging. Well, again, what are they really getting? Are they getting something that's very templated, that, just a few numbers are plugged in, or are they getting that time in those conversations with you to help them clarify what that great life, as you said, means to them, and, where their concerns and their fears are, so that you can help mitigate that and coach them, advise them through those things. And so it's, to build belief, it does take some work. It takes some work to dig for the information to give you the facts that you need. And so some people need to see research, hard number research, and other people, 5 conversations with a satisfied long-term client of an advisor can make the whole world of difference.
It's so interesting, and it does play into sort of the personality traits, that we each have, and that we're all going to be coming at this at a different angle. There is some research out there on the value of financial planning that Morningstar has done, and I believe they called it Gamma, and it really was the value of just tax loss harvesting and rebalancing portfolios. I mean, it was very investment focused. It did not get into the fact that, trying to help, I helped a client one time negotiate. She was going to get a big salary increase. And instead we negotiated for more time off because she was a physician that worked 80 hours a week. And so she moved up to 12 weeks off, I think, a year instead of just 8. And that made her life so much better instead of just taking more money, which she wasn't spending anyway, because she didn't have time to spend any money. So like, those are the intangibles in financial planning that we have to just sort of understand and see and come to accept. And to your point earlier about belief in self is that maybe, it is talking to folks that use a financial planner or have used your services in the past to say, what do you really value that I do? And I bet none of them say, you know what, you got me an extra 0.5% of investment returns last year. They're going to say that you were there to answer their questions, to make them feel comfortable, make them feel safe, that, you were there to pull it all together, whatever that is. But maybe that's the, again, one way of addressing it is to go back and, and just talk to the folks that you've helped. So moving on from that's integrated beliefs. So then what is the second success driver then?
We call it goal transparency. And goal transparency isn't just being, some people say, well, I'm very goal oriented or I'm very goal driven. Goal transparency means having your goals written, specific and measurable, SMART goals. The difference is that they're visible to you and to others in writing, in your actions, in your words, and in your behaviors, meaning that you're not keeping it a secret. And in working with people, and this would be interesting as a financial advisor, how hard is it to get people to articulate their goals?
It's tough.
Because if I say it out loud, now I'm accountable to it. And so we keep our goals hidden because then if we don't do it, if we don't act on it, if we don't achieve it, we don't have to explain that to anybody. And so I know that in our own friends, we're referring people all the time into financial planners. Many of them will tell me, well, I don't want someone telling me what to do with my money, or I don't want to have to second guess if I want to go out and splurge on this or that. Well, that means they don't want the transparency and accountability that comes with it.
So with goal transparency, this is really where maybe a business coach or a life coach or a study group of your peers that can sort of hold you accountable and force you to sit down and say, this is what I actually want. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yes. There's a great little video that you can see, I believe, free online. It's called Seeing Red Cars. Seeing Red Cars. I think it's Laura Goodman, I think is her name. And it's a 3.5 minute video. And it makes such a great point about ask anybody what they want and they will tell you what they don't want. It is so hard for people to articulate something they want. And a goal is simply a stated outcome. That's all it is. We can set negative goals as much as we can set positive goals. So when you're stating what you don't want, you're wiring your brain to achieve that.
It's interesting. I've never heard anyone say negative goals, but that really is what whenever you either set the bar too low or just sort of self-deprecate, I guess, around certain things, that's really what you're doing.
Right. If your words can't support or your mental. So if you're writing a goal and let's say I'm going to bring on 20 new service level 1 clients next year, and you write that like you're supposed to and all that, but in your head, you're going, this isn't going to happen. I'll be lucky if I get 12. You are now conflicted in yourself on what's the real goal. So is the real goal the 20 you wrote, or is the real goal the 12 that you keep telling yourself is what's really attainable? And so you have to listen to your self-talk as you're writing goals, because if your self-talk can't match what you're putting down on paper or on screen, you got to resolve that conflict or you're not going to achieve that goal.
And to your point, it's very hard to set goals because we hate to fail. Right. We'd almost rather set the bar too low and know that we can achieve it every single year, as opposed to setting a bar where we really want to be and understanding that it's going to take a stretch. There's been this picture floating around LinkedIn, and it kind of bugs me, but this guy fresh out of college wrote himself a $2.5 million check to be cashed in like 10 years. And it bugs me for various reasons, but it's a good example of, this whole like, look, I'm going to stretch. Most of us 10 years out of college don't have a $2.5 million check to write ourselves. And so he's setting that goal high enough that every day and every week, month, quarter, year, you're having to reevaluate, are you doing what it takes to accomplish what you have said are your goals? And again, the best way I know is peer pressure and peer support, we'll say.
Well, and I call those stakeholders. So, we have lots of different stakeholders, but we also often don't employ them to support us. So it's whatever goal you have, you need to share it with somebody. It might be your spouse, it might be a partner, it might be a friend, it might be your peer group, it might be a business coach, but it's sharing that goal very specifically and the plan with at least one other person. And it's not just about them holding you accountable, it's about self-accountability. It's about that transparency. It's about that person celebrating when you achieve it with you, but maybe they have some ideas on how you can get there faster or easier. And then the whole thing about achieving goals. So setting goals is a process in itself, but achieving the goal is another whole step. So we can set goals, but to achieve them means that accountability, that transparency, it means taking the actions. And that often means every single month reviewing where you're at in relation to the goal. And this is the hard part, without judgment and blame and guilt. And it's just looking, am I on track or not? And then asking yourself a few questions. Okay, if I'm not on track, what happened? Without getting into blame and victim. But what happened? Now, is this goal still important to me? Am I going to renew we all have the 4 R's. I review it. Then I either, based on what I've reviewed, am I renewing my commitment to the plan as is? Or am I having to revise this in some way? If I'm behind, am I going to get it back, do some extra activities over the next 30 days and get it back on track? If I'm ahead, am I going to revise and maybe up that goal to maybe where it belongs? But am I going to renew it as is? Am I going to revise it in some way? Or the one that was a big lesson for me years ago, am I going to replace it? So, you've got somebody on a financial plan and suddenly they find out they're pregnant with twins. Think that might change their plan a little bit?
Sure.
Or there's a sudden death in the family, or there's all kinds of things that can interrupt that plan. Well, then, you know what? That's not the right plan, and they've got to get permission to replace it. It's okay. Things change over time. And I think that's the other thing that stops people from writing goals is we think they're so permanent.
That's a great point that, again, if we write them down and we don't achieve them, we're a failure. It's okay that life happens, but you've got to have a plan. Is it the saying that if you don't know where you're going, then you won't know when you get there? That may not quite be it, but that's really sort of this, you've got to at least know the direction that you're headed. And I'll add one more piece of that, and that is when you accomplish your goals, celebrate them. It's the other piece that we tend to not do. Back to your point around people feeling arrogant. Like when you get 3 quotes in the national media publications for the month that you wanted to do, celebrate it and be excited and share it with your study group or your with your stakeholders so that they can celebrate with you, because that's what they're there for. That's what they want to do. It's not just about commiserating in misery. It's also about celebrating the success.
Well, to piggyback on that, one of the parts of your goal plan should be identifying what's your reward when you achieve the goal and being really specific on it, which is like what that guy did with that check. But I would even take it further and say, okay, what's that $2.5 million going to do for him? What's he going to do with that? So, people say, well, that's going to help me earn, my first 100K as an advisor, or it's going to cause less stress. Well, take it further and ask yourself, so what? What's that 100K am I going to do with it? Is that going to lead to a specific purchase? Is it going to lead to a specific savings amount? And that's important to a certain goal. Is it going to be to some kind of a trip or some kind of activity that is a celebration? But we need to if we want self-motivation, we've got to focus on, when I do all these things and this happens, this goal happens, how am I rewarding myself? And being really specific on that. And I've seen people as much as, you know what, this week, if I make these 20 follow-up phone calls to stagnant leads, I'm getting a manicure, or I'm gonna skip the Bud Light, and buy a brandy, who knows what it is. But they get, we can reward ourselves for small increments of actions that we've taken to keep us going forward. So I think often people wait till the big thing to happen. How can you celebrate along the way?
I think that's awesome. I love that. Okay, so moving on to sort of the next success drivers, or I guess the third of the four, which is initiative, which this one hopefully isn't the piece that many advisors are struggling with, but define this for us and sort of where you see this come up for your students.
So initiative is our self-directed personal energy that we put out each day. And so, this is what I think some people call motivation. But initiative is about energy. And when we have, these are all tied together, when we have strong goals and a plan to get there, we typically will put more energy toward those goals and be proactive versus reactive in things. And so, during any given day, think about it. When you're working on things that aren't interesting to you or seem fruitless or unimportant to you, we can run out of energy early. You look at the clock and it's 10 o'clock and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like it's, 8 p.m. But when we're working on the things that are exciting for us and that we really enjoy and love doing, we can have energy sometimes and put in 12 hours without even noticing that we've been working that long because we enjoyed it and we see it going somewhere. And so I do see plenty of people be low on initiative when they're not being purposeful in their actions to get them where they want to go. So instead of putting the energy toward the things that are going to advance them, they become very reactive and they work on busy work stuff. So, they'll revisit their CRM leads. They'll read the latest, journal that just came out. They'll find all of these things to do that aren't things that will get them where they want to go. Because we can waste 8 to 10 hours a day really easy, especially with everything we can find on the internet.
And I feel like initiative is something you can fake it till you make it. Like, even if you wake up one day and you just don't have the energy to do what you need to do, is just forcing yourself, getting into good habits that basically are the initiative and what you would be doing intrinsically if you had the energy. Because look, entrepreneurship it's a roller coaster, and some days are much higher than others. Some days are very high and very low at the same time. It feels like you're not going to wake up every day excited to follow up with 20 prospects that haven't called you back in the last month. There will just be days where you have to say, you know what, I'm just going to do it because I know it needs to be done.
And then, when we look at most successful people, they do the things that they don't love, but they know it's going to get them where they need to be. So, you've got some people that, right, making those phone calls is the dreaded thing. Other people, it's like, woohoo, I get to talk to people. And then they'll dread taking the time to put together the documentations they need or finish the proposal, before the deadline, or, finish some of their studies that they need to for any of their designations or ongoing education. They'll procrastinate on the things that aren't as enjoyable for them. And when you look at the most successful, they are really good at managing their time for making sure that they've got the time for the things that have the most impact.
It's a great point. And I do think that it's one of the things that listeners have heard me say is that it's sort of the central theme that runs through all of the successful advisors that we've had on the podcast is they just have this initiative. They just have this intrinsic, this internal drive to take the next step. And they just do what needs to be done, but not to be confused with the fact that it's just natural for them. They didn't wake up every day excited to go, to night classes after they've worked a long day and they'd rather be home spending time with their kids in order to get their CFP. but they did what needed to be done because in the end, that was what was going to lead to their success and then being able to accomplish, what it is that they wanted to be able to do. So we've covered integrated beliefs, which included belief in self, belief in role, belief in value. We have goal transparency, initiative. And so then there's one more to sort of close out the episode.
Which you just kind of touched on, is emotional intelligence. And so emotional intelligence is having an awareness of an ability to manage our personal emotions in a healthy and productive way. And that's being resilient when faced with rejection, setbacks, obstacles, the things we don't want to do. So emotional intelligence is, weathering the ups and downs and bouncing back quicker than maybe we would normally like to. But it's knowing what are the things that shut you down, that zap your energy, that, keep you from acting on something or believing. I mean, these all tie together, all the drivers. But emotional intelligence is going, you know what? Typically, when I get into this situation, this is what would normally happen. I'm not going to let that happen. So, for example, among my team, we sometimes work on corporate sales opportunities for 18 months. And if we find out we lose it, some people, we can go south for days in, oh my gosh, the amount of hours and time and money and lost opportunity that we just spent on this. But we've agreed on a certain number of minutes only that we get to kick the chair, have our pity party, cry in the bathroom, whatever we need to do, depending on the severity of the disappointment. And the most we give ourselves is 15 minutes. And that's got to be really big. Most things, it's a 3 to 5 minute. And then you know what? Put on your big girl panties and go forward.
And it is hard to pick yourself up and dust yourself off. And learning emotional intelligence, it is something some people are born with more of a gift for than others, but it is something that can be learned. My first boss, Rick Kaler, would tell you that he spent about $80,000 in therapy learning how to increase his emotional intelligence. And with that, the ability to connect with other people's emotions and be able to have those conversations. But, again, this is when I think about and I'll ask you the same question, so I'll go ahead and prep you for it. It's like, what's the one thing you can do? Listeners, probably get tired of hearing me say the same thing over and over again, but it really is surround yourself with those stakeholders. Go form a study group. Get in a study group of like-minded advisors so that you can talk about these things. And for someone to say, hey, yeah, you had a tough day, get over it. It's okay. I'm sorry it happened. I'm sorry you lost that client. Now go make 4 phone calls and try to get yourself a new client.
Kick them in the pants, right?
Yep. Because some of us we just need that. And, and truth be told, it's very rewarding to be on the other side of that, to be the one kicking other people in the pants sometimes. It can feel good, right? When you're the one being like, hey, just get it done. And because in another little while, probably the next day, you're going to need that same kick. And it's just so nice to have that mutually beneficial sort of supportive relationship. And you can certainly get it with a significant other or a business coach. I just love study groups and just the way that those work.
Well, and you've probably heard this before, Alan. I was at a conference this last weekend and they talked about you are an average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And in business, you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And that is income level, that is education level, that is connection and resources. And that's why XYPN, I think, is so great, is because, being at the conference last year and seeing the people's relationships, and even through the virtual genuine sales class, watching the group of advisors in there create their own study group and help each other with their proposals and their sales process pieces. They elevated the whole group instead of just themselves.
And it really is my belief that, you have to come from this abundance mentality that, there are plenty of clients in the world. We are not fighting for clients. There are plenty of folks out there that need our services, that need our help, that don't know what financial planning is, that are making poor financial decisions every day, that need us in their lives, that we can help each other. Because the best thing I think we can do is spread awareness of what real financial planning actually is, because we have decades of crappy sales people in the products world that have sort of put a massive stain on our industry and what we do as financial planners, because consumers don't know the difference between product sales and real financial planning and what we actually do. That, the best thing we can do is elevate each other, because as a whole, we're all going to get lifted up with that rising tide. So Nancy, as we're coming to a close, for the advisors that are out there that are listening to this saying, hey, you know what? I see where you're coming from. This is the will part of that, skill and will. And we all learn the skill in CFP school, but this is where my struggle is. If there's one thing that, that they need to go do today, one thing that they can take away and really implement, what do you think your sort of top of the page idea would be for them?
To build their will?
Yep.
I think identify which of those areas is holding you back the most, and putting together a goal to make that stronger. And what are the 2 things that you can do in the next 30 days to impact that for yourself? That would be, my advice. And to not confuse the will with skill. They're really 2 different things. And you could argue that somebody with less skill but really high will could be much more successful, because they're going to be out there doing more. And that's something else that I just heard this week is, more knowledge is typically not what most people need to reach higher levels of success in business. It's really acting more.
I love it. And I'll tell you, I couldn't agree more. You can try to take on too much. You may have heard, for listeners out there, you may have heard that, a little bit of yourself in each of these areas that you feel like are holding you back. So really focusing on the one piece that you think is holding you back the most, and then making a plan, an action plan of even just 2 things that you can do to really start developing the confidence around whatever it is that you're struggling with. So
the one thing I would say is, out of all of these, the one that I think centers almost everything else is the goal transparency.
So that's really where folks can start.
That I would say that would be such a strong starting point of getting specific goals with plans, with including what's that reward for when you do those things, who are your stakeholders, what are the resources you need to achieve it. If you nail 3 specific goals, not just all about your firm, at least one of them has to be personal, because you're one person and your whole life has to be in sync. If you do that, the other ones are going to be positively impacted.
Fantastic. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show again today and sharing your expertise and wisdom. We really do appreciate it. If you'd like more time to spend with your clients, First Ascent Asset Management can help. First Ascent builds and manages investment portfolios for independent financial advisors and their clients for a flat fee of $500 per account. This industry-first approach to pricing makes professional investment management affordable for everyone without sacrificing quality. First Ascent's 7-member investment committee includes 5 CFAs, a PhD, and a CFP who collectively bring decades of experience, objectivity, and fresh perspectives. First Ascent offers a variety of portfolios designed to produce solid long-term performance while keeping internal expenses and trading costs low. First Ascent's high-touch service team stands with you as a resource to provide guidance and to make account opening and servicing the accounts easy and hassle-free. They also offer a streamlined technology platform to facilitate proposal generation and paperless account opening. Visit their website at firstascentam.com or give them a call at 720-465-7888. Be sure to join our VIP community at XYPlanningNetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to XYPlanningNetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.